Being a cashier at a reputable company can be quite a rewarding job, but it can be quite stressful too. Having to go through the hassle of balancing accounts, keeping records, counting huge sums of money you probably don't have isn't something just anyone can do. You need patience, concentration, and most of all, honesty. But what happens when you find yourself in a tricky situation? A situation that, if not handled properly, could cost you your job. A cashier named Alice found herself in similar shoes. While doing her job at the local company she works in, she found something shocking. What did she find? How did it change her life? Alice was a young Canadian lady in her early 20s. Life hadn't been exactly fair to her, so she had moved to the UK with her mom to seek greener pastures. Due to the rough times and the broken home she grew up in, Alice never had the option of going to college. Her dad didn't care much about her and her mom. He treated them like trash. Her mom, a struggling breadwinner, couldn't help her further her education either. But her mom did help her do one thing though, and it was that one thing that would make Alice's story worth telling today. Alice's mom helped her build an impeccable character. You see, even though they had little, Janet, Alice's mom, seldom complained or poured out her frustration on Alice. Rather, she taught her daughter to be patient, kind, and hardworking. Alice respected her mom so much and always obeyed her mom's instructions. Even when they moved to the UK, she would help strangers who were in need, do home chores for her mom, and was always very polite. It wasn't very long after Alice and her mom moved to the UK, she landed a job, thanks to her outstanding character. But she did not know that this job would lead her to something deep, something far beyond what she could imagine. Alice's job role was to be a cashier for a local banking and logistics company. The company helped people who needed a secure place to save their money without the hassles of going to a bank, and they also helped with simple logistics, sending out small to medium-sized parcels for their customers. Her job entailed balancing checks, receiving and verifying packages, recording and monitoring customer transactions, keeping tabs on any issues involved with logistics, and of course, welcoming customers with a smile. Alice never slacked on her job. To her, this was a golden opportunity. She had her own office, desk, and a laptop to work with. Time went on, and Alice mastered her job. She would always get up to greet new and old customers, and she never seemed unhappy or sad. Customers seemed to like her because of her calm and collected nature. But you see, no one knew Alice's true secret power. Her real power was in her ability to read situations. Alice was so attentive to detail that she could take one look at a customer and know if they were shy, reluctant, in a hurry, sad, or even disturbed. She would then act or react in a way that would put the customer at ease. Sometimes, customers ended up doing transactions they never planned to, and other times they would chat with the young lady and even forget why they were there. Barely 6 months after Alice started working, she realized she had already become a friend to most of the customers at her workplace. One such customer was Mrs. Kenneth, a young African-American woman in her late 30s. Mrs. Kenneth was quite the opposite of Alice. Whereas Alice always wore a smile, she, Mrs. Kenneth, always seemed focused and angry. She was the kind of person that wouldn't look at your face twice, even if you greeted them. I'm sure you've met such people before. Or maybe you're even one of them. Alice was one of the few people Mrs. Kenneth ever opened up to, and it was all because of her kind and lovely nature. The mysterious married lady confided in Alice, telling her all about herself, even though Alice never asked for such information. It turned out that she was actually married to a violent man, a drunkard, who never cared for anything besides booze. Whenever her husband would get intoxicated, he would beat her to a stupor, but he always managed to avoid her face so as not to raise suspicion. Mrs. Kenneth even showed Alice the bruises hidden beneath the long, flowing gowns she always wore. Alice couldn't believe this woman had been carrying all this pain and anguish in her for so long, and yet remained silent. She wished she could help, but she was in no place to do so. However, things took a different turn 2 months later when Alice heard some shocking news. 2 months after the revelation with Mrs. Kenneth, Alice found out that the woman hadn't shown up at the office since then. Normally, she'd come to deposit cash or send parcels at least once a week to her elderly parents in another part of town. And so, later the next day, Alice got the shock of her life when the local news reports mentioned the case of a missing person. Mrs. Kenneth, the young cashier, couldn't believe her ears. How did this happen? What should she do? For the first time ever, Alice lost her cool. Even customers could see worry written all over her face. Yet she couldn't share this information with anyone, at least not for now. But just while she was panicking at heart, a young man came in later that evening with a small package and a note. It seemed he had come to deliver a parcel because that was the normal procedure some customers did. They'd write the address and name of the receiver and every other necessary detail on the note, and then submit the parcel and the delivery fee. The young man came forward, gave Alice the parcel and the note, and left. Alice, in her quick intuitive mind, could already tell that something was off. The guy walked briskly and never replied to Alice's greetings. Moreover, he never looked her in the face. Since it all happened so fast, she didn't even get to ask for the delivery fee. Before she could realize her mistake, he had already walked out the door. Alice became disturbed. What was in the parcel, and why was he in a hurry? As she began to observe the stuff the young man brought in to see if, perhaps, he had lodged the money somewhere, her worries doubled. There was no note. It was just a blank piece of paper. Alice was completely thrown off balance. First, Mrs. Kenneth's disturbing news, and now this. What was really going on? Alice picked up the paper and realized it wasn't a regular paper. It seemed thick, and its texture was also different from normal paper. She ran her hands through the paper and realized the surface was a bit rough, as if it had been used. Alice needed answers, so she did something she had never done before, something her job description doesn't allow. She decided to peer into the package to see what was inside. As she did, the first thing she saw was a blood-stained cloth. Fear and panic gripped her immediately. Why is someone trying to deliver a blood-stained cloth? She touched the package again and realized there was something like a flash drive. Alice couldn't hold it anymore. She took the paper and ran inside to her boss. In a minute, they were both at the police station with the paper and parcel, explaining what they saw. The officer who attended to them was well experienced and suspected that the paper contained a hidden message. So he quietly took it to a dark room and shined a light beneath it. Lo and behold, the words, "Help me, it's my husband," were written in capital letters. The shocked officer quickly returned to share his discovery with Alice and her boss. In a moment, he searched through the parcel and realized it contained blood-stained clothes, a medical report, and a flash drive. Alice didn't need anybody to tell her this was compiled evidence for a serious crime. But who was behind it? A quick inspection of the drive and medical report showed that it belonged to no other person than Mrs. Kenneth. The flash contained CCTV footage showing several instances of her husband brutally beating her, and the medical report showed she had been recently diagnosed with brain damage. Putting two and two together, the trio soon realized that the message was implying her husband was responsible for her going missing. Within a matter of seconds, a search team was mobilized. Thanks to Alice, who knew Mrs. Kenneth's address, the police stormed in on Mr. Kenneth at home and forced him to confess. It turned out that Mrs. Kenneth was going to turn in the evidence on her husband, but he found out and locked her up before going to report to the police that she was missing. However, unluckily for him, she had already arranged with a mailman that if anything should happen to her, he should deliver the parcel and hidden note to her only friend Alice at the logistics company. They found Mrs. Kenneth at an abandoned warehouse, lean and wounded all over. Mr. Kenneth was quickly arrested, and Alice was praised for her role in solving the crime. In fact, the town news channel featured her on live TV to share their side of the story. It was truly a great experience for Alice. She became the talk of the town, a local hero. But what made Alice happy the most was a text she received from Mrs. Kenneth later that night. A 2-sentence text that read, "Thank you. I owe you my life."